Hey guys, welcome to chapter 5. We're going to start talking about exercise adaptations or adaptations from resistance training. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get rolling. So again, this unit is going to be 5, 7, and 8, which will also touch on nutrition and sports psychology. So this one kind of starts to mix in a couple things. So acute means right away. So what's going on kind of right away? This is in your textbook as well, so you can take a look at this. So neurological responses, so EMG, amplitude increases, number of motor units recruited. Again, a motor unit is the neuron and then all the fibers that it innervates or attaches to. You have muscular changes. So your hydrogen ions increase. That's what will eventually lead to things like the burning feeling that you have. It's not really the lactate acid or the lactic acid, but it's that acidic environment. Ammonia levels will increase. ATP concentration maybe decreases a little bit. Glycogen will go down again because we're using energy. So that's going to typically, our stored energy is going to go down. Endocrine, so think like hormones and things like that. Epinephrine is going to increase. Cortisol, which is a stress response hormone, is going to increase as well. But so does testosterone and growth hormone. So again, these are kind of your acute changes. So right during or right after your resistance training, these are the things that are going to happen or tend to happen. So we'll break these down a little bit more. So motor unit recruitment, again, you're going to activate more motor units. You can think of the size principle we kind of looked at in previous chapters. You're going to start with low fibers, and then that's going to increase as the force increases as well. You also have what's called rate coding, and that's the firing rate. So both will increase to compensate for the loss in force production. So basically, as you start to fatigue and your muscles get tired, they will increase the number of units that are recruited. So you have to work more of the muscle, and then how quickly that firing rate goes. So that's the game that we're kind of playing at that point. Muscular, again, the fatigue, that accumulation of, we call them metabolites. So H+, that's those hydrogen ions, and then ammonia is another one. So those will increase with fatigue. Those are one of the, fatigue is something really complicated that people still argue about, kind of where does it come from? Is it a safety mechanism? Is it just our body at the end of its rope? But again, what we tend to agree on is that the hydrogen ions are what's building up, and then depletion of fuel. So our fuel, again, glycogen is stored glucose, and then CP stands for creatine phosphate. So think of your immediate system that we'd want to use. Again, with endocrine, so epinephrine is going to increase. So that helps with fat breakdown and carbohydrate breakdown. So that's good, especially if we want fat broken down, eventually helping using that as an energy source, and then we're not storing it. So then that might help lead to fat loss. Cortisol, again, is a catabolic. So it's a breakdown drug, or excuse me, endocrine system. So that's going to lead to some tissue degradation. So it's going to break down, but again, you break down so you can build up. Testosterone is going to increase. So muscle protein synthesis is one of the benefits of testosterone, along with a couple other things. And then growth hormone, again, muscle protein synthesis. So you want those to increase while you're exercising or right after exercise to enhance that muscle building. So if your goal is muscle building and you're not resistance training, you're probably not going to achieve your goal, or it's going to be a lot harder to achieve your goal. Now there's chronic adaptation. So this would be over a long period of time. What are the changes that you're going to see? Okay. And some of it's going to change a little bit, and don't get too lost in this. Just know, I would recommend understanding what's going to increase and what's going to decrease. Now, most of the time you could probably guess or assume a lot of these things, but again, you have this in your book. I would look at these tables and make sure you kind of know what's going on. So you have muscle performance. So your strength, endurance, your power, long-term training, those should all increase, right? That's your training goals types of things. The enzymes that your muscle uses, those will probably increase. So they're going to get more efficient at the chemical reactions that you're trying to do in order to perform the exercises, generate force, those types of things. The substrates that are also there. So ATP might increase, creatine phosphate concentrations. How much is there? Those types of things, again, you want those to increase. That's going to provide you with more energy. More energy, you should be able to move more force or more weight, kind of going through. Your muscle fiber characteristics, those can change more so depending on how you train. Resistance training, we typically, if you follow kind of the percentages of the NSCA, you should see type 1s kind of become type 2. And then type 2s will either stay type 2. They might, if you go more power emphasis, type 2X or type 2B. Again, depending on how you're doing it. Where endurance things, so think more running, long distance running, even very high repetitions, you might get more type 1 fiber increases. Cross-sectional area is what CSA means. Body composition, right? Hopefully your body fat goes down. Your fat-free mass will increase. Fat-free mass, so that'd be like muscle. And then your metabolic rate, so your basal metabolic rate. So the more muscle you have, the more energy your body requires to burn. So let's say I burn 2,000 calories and then I put on 10 pounds of muscle. That 2,000 calories is probably going to increase because more muscle is going to use more energy, more calories. And so that's where you also help to see, as long as the caloric intake stays similar, you start to see that weight decrease and that muscle increase. And that's a balance that a lot of us are looking for. And then neurological changes, again, motor unit recruitment is going to increase, motor firing rate is going to increase. Co-contraction is basically like inefficient contraction, where you might have like the bicep and the tricep contracting at the same time because they're just kind of freaking out. So they're not as efficient in movements. And so this might look like shaking. It might be like instability. So that tends to decrease the more you do resistance training, right? More fluidity, more athletic, those types of things. And then structural changes, again, bone density tends to increase with resistance training. So if you have clients that are older or losing bone mass or have low bone density, resistance training is great for them. And then connective tissue, which connects muscle and bone to bone, those things are going to increase as well, long-term adaptations to your exercise. Again, some neurologically specifically, so more strength gains early on, they tend to be associated with the neural. So if you're training somebody, and you yourself, if you haven't been training for a long time or have never done it before, you tend to see a lot of gains early on, whether that's strength, typically strength or muscle size, because of the neurological enhancements. So not so much the long-term changes, but just your nervous system has gotten more efficient and you'll start to see those gains. Again, typically firing rate and that motor recruitment rate. So just know that going on, that if you have a client, you might expect those changes to happen very early, and that's going to get more difficult the more they train. So don't expect, whatever, 10, 15 pound, max rep increase they have, and expect that consistently throughout. It's probably going to be decreased slightly, but you still want to push those limits. Again, chronic, you got muscular, and then we'll look at structural. So muscular, again, your muscle size, hypertrophy, should go up. Your type 2Xs might become more type 2As. Again, you have to train power to keep your power, which would be type 2X. Fat-free mass increases, as we talked about. Your energy systems are going to be more efficient. The enzymes used for those chemical reactions are going to increase. And then structurally, again, connective tissue, tendon stiffness, which is going to help with force production. That's going to be huge. Bone mineral density. The bones are able to respond to the stress of more muscle because the muscles are going to act on the joints. Joints are made up of multiple bones. And so that's why you'd want your bones to also increase in muscle mass. Your cardiovascular system, again, this is according to the text. So the resistance training depends primarily on your anaerobic metabolism. You'll also look at myoglobin and mitochondrial density tend to decrease. So what the typical belief is and understanding is that the more you resistance train, and you're working on, we'll call it more immediate system training, there's a decrease in your aerobic ability, your aerobic performance. Likewise, if you were, training for a marathon and you're doing all this running, long distance running, high endurance running, your strength gains may struggle or they may suffer slightly. So if you have a client that is very specific about, I want to run a marathon, you know what, and they're going to run a marathon and train for a marathon, just understand that the strength gains may not be as great as if they were like, I want to just get stronger, right? Likewise, if you have a client who's like, I just want to get strong and big, but then you have them doing hours of cardio or long distance running, that might be detrimental to their actual goals. Now, their overall health, it might be good, but to their goals, it might be different. So you might have to modify depending on what your client's goals are. And then body composition, again, you should increase your free fat mass, and then your body fat percentage should decrease. Now, again, that's why I tell a lot of my clients or my former clients, I'm not too worried about the weight on the scale. I'm more worried about how you look, how you feel, and what your body fat percentage is. Because let's just say someone comes in at 150 pounds and they're like, I want to build muscle. And it's like, great. So we train, we're doing it for, whatever, 6, 7, 8 weeks. And then we retest and they still weigh 150, but you look at them and they're stronger. They look leaner. What that means is that their muscle mass increased and their fat decreased, and they just happen to be the same weight, right? So their goal might be increased mass, right? But again, a lot of the goal is going to be that decreased body fat percentage. Now, if you're already a very low body fat percentage, let's say you're pretty lean or you're pretty skinny, then you should start to see that muscle increase. But again, if you have a lot of fat to lose, if that's the goal, then you're going to expect that decrease there, and then that balancing out with the muscle mass coming in. Factors that influence these adaptations, right? So specificity. So if you work free weights, so think dumbbells, barbells, things like that, you will improve in free weights, right? More specifically to it, this idea of imposed demand. So whatever I train, the adaptation is going to come to that. Maybe at a specific velocity. If you train fast, you will get better at things that are fast. If you train slow, you will be improved at those slow movements. So again, depending on your client's goals or how you want to kind of program, that's going to help decide what specifically the body's going to adapt to. The body only adapts to something that provides a big enough stress for that to happen. Sex is hormone driven. The strength, or depending on your sex, strength per pound of free fat mass, fat-free mass, excuse me. So males and females are almost actually similar in that strength per pound. Now, again, guys tend to weigh more than females. And then strength per unit of muscle, the difference is actually very small, right? So to think that like females can't gain muscle, right, is false. You can get very strong as a female or as a male. Just know that the per pound that's where that ratio is going to come in. But again, hormone driven, guys do tend to have more testosterone, human growth hormone, things like that. But females still have it and they still produce it, and they will produce it with strength training. So they will have that aspect to it. Now, if you are training females or you are a female and there's that worry of like, I don't want to get bulky, I don't want to look like a bodybuilder, I tell people and I tell my clients, it doesn't just happen overnight, right? If you're lean and you just want to put on some muscle or tone, right? That's a trigger word for me, and not get bulky, you'll see that change happens. Again, it's an adaptation. It takes a while to get there. And so I just say, trust the process, again, lift heavy, challenge yourself with physical exercise. It doesn't have to be 20 reps or 50 reps with dumbbell curls or anything like that. And you'll get to that point where you're like, this is where I want to be. And then you change your program and then you go into maintenance, or maybe you want to put on more muscle, or, you want to focus on strength. But again, it's not this like 1 second, I go to bed after 3 sets of 12, I wake up and I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger as a female. It's like, that's not how it works. So again, there's a reliance in telling your clients that, not to worry. I would not worry so much about that. You're going to see those adaptations and then make the changes accordingly. With age, muscle mass decreases starting in your 30s. Around 29 is supposed to be like the peak of your physical health. And then after that, it breaks down. And so the challenge is, how do we slow down that process? I call it longevity. And there's a great podcast out that I just listened to that talks about muscle retention, and keeping muscle and building muscle is one of the most important factors in the not only longevity, so how long you live, but the health span and how well you live. The more muscle you have, the more you're able to do, the more energy you're going to have, again, keeping you in that healthy range, right? Because increased basal metabolic rate. So it'll delay any types of diseases that you might pick up if you were obese or non-active. And so again, keeping that is very important. But you will start to lose force. Like, it's not atypical to lose strength. It's just keeping that as high as you can, right? High intensity resistance training is very huge. And then genetics are going to play a part between what you're born with, whether it's type 1 and type 2. So for example, using someone like Usain Bolt, if you took a biopsy of his leg muscles, probably going to be a bunch of type 2, because again, high force output, probably fatigues relatively quickly compared to the rest of the world, or like long distance running. Where you take a marathon runner, an elite marathon runner, they're going to probably have more type 2, greater for endurance. Now, again, there's some change. We might be able to shift those fibers. It's just we're all born with a set ratio, and then we modify so in between. So understanding that can actually dictate you, if you're young enough or you're interested in sports, but you don't kind of know where to go, understanding where you might succeed. And this is kind of from just hobbies or you introducing a training program can determine like, wow, you might have a lot of type 1. You might like long distance running, or you might like cycling or something like that. Or if you're really powerful, right? And you just notice someone right off the bat has, a strong box jump, or, a high hang clean or power clean, a power movement. You're like, wow, you might be type 2. You might be great for those team sports that require high power output. So again, it can kind of guide the path in that selection as well. With training though, there's two things that I think we do need to be mindful of. And one of those is overtraining and then detraining. So overtraining is when you hit a staleness and just kind of general fatigue. So you're fatigued, even though you're not exercising. So your sleep's not great during the day, you're tired. Basically what that stems from is inappropriate levels of volume or intensity. So too much of it typically is what it is. So decreased performance overall. Most of the time you're attempting to do too much too soon. So less is more sometimes. Recovery is a huge component of training. Some people think I've got to train 7 days a week to get the gains that I want. Where in reality, if you train hard 3 days a week, but you're resting and you're recovering properly, the other 4 might actually be more beneficial to you, because the body needs to rebuild and be ready for the next training exercise day. Then you have detraining, where the adaptations seem to cease. So then you get the opposite of what happens during training. So you lose muscle tissue, your neurological function decreases. This tends to slowly decrease, or it's a slower decrease compared to overtraining. And again, this is if you keep it between 1 and 2 training sessions a week to start, you can tend to keep that detraining from happening. So this would be like after football season, we were told to rest for 2 or 3 weeks. And so you would start to lose those gains that you had either during season or right before season started. So keeping at least 1 to 2 sessions will keep you from that detraining aspect. And that's chapter 5. And so again, I would recommend looking at the acute, knowing what's acute, knowing what's chronic, adaptation wise, and then the benefits of those. And then there's a chapter 6 on aerobic. There is your chapter, or there's a chapter in your book on it. I don't have a presentation on it. We will jump into nutrition and sports psych in the next couple chapters. See you later.